centuries old and seemingly impervious to scandal, the past several years have represented one of the most tumultuous eras in modern memory. What began as a long-running controversy involving one of its own has evolved into a full-blown crisis impacting the monarchy's public standing, its internal cohesion, and its future direction. Central to this saga, and now at the forefront of public discussion, is a revelation that the heir to the throne, Prince William, actively sought to have his uncle, Prince Andrew, removed from the royal fold long before the formal stripping of titles by King Charles III. This report synthesizes the nearly decade-long trajectory of events, the personal and institutional conflicts underlying them, and the wider implications for an institution at a crossroads. The origins of a royal scandal. What would become a defining crisis for the British royal family had humble beginnings, and a disastrous public moment. In November 2019, Prince Andrew, the second son of Queen Elizabeth II and younger brother to the future King Charles III, gave a televised interview in which he sought to defend himself against allegations of sexual misconduct and inappropriate association with the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Rather than quell concerns, the interview sparked widespread outrage due to its tone, content, and apparent lack of empathy toward the victims who had come forward. Andrew's attempt to assuage public concerns was seen by many as out of touch and tone-deaf, exacerbating the damage to his personal reputation and casting a long shadow over the monarchy itself. That infamous interview was a catalyst, not the end, of the controversy. While the prince relinquished his public duties shortly thereafter, stepping back from official royal life, he remained a figure associated with ceremonial events and maintained close familial ties behind palace walls. His continued visibility, family gatherings, church services, and even public appearances kept the matter alive in the public eye and ensured that the stain associated with his name would not easily fade. For many within and outside the institution, this was untenable. And according to revelations now emerging, it was at this early juncture that Prince William, the future king and institution's spearhead for modernization, took an unequivocal and starkly different position from some of his elders. William's growing concern. In the years following that controversial interview, sources close to the Prince of Wales indicate that William privately communicated deep concern over his uncle's continued association with the monarchy. He believed that the presence of Andrew, even in a semi-retired capacity, served as a persistent reputational risk and undermined public confidence in the institution's integrity. The core of William's perspective was straightforward and uncompromising. Andrew had brought this crisis upon himself, and to protect the monarchy's future, decisive action was required. Rather than shielding Andrew or allowing him to quietly fade into the background, William believed that his uncle should face meaningful and visible consequences, including removal from all royal functions and distancing from the official family image. This stance was more than mere personal disappointment. It was rooted in a calculated understanding of how public trust in the monarchy could be eroded by perceived fate-shielding, nepotism, or avoidance of accountability. William reportedly felt that protecting Andrew, shielding him from consequences, amounted to placing the institution's well-being behind family loyalty, a choice he was unwilling to make if it endangered the monarchy's legitimacy. Throughout these years, his position reportedly hardened. Andrew should not only step back from formal duties but should be divested of even informal or symbolic ties to the royal household. William envisioned a scenario in which Andrew would be effectively banished from the royal fold, removed from official events, excluded from traditional family functions, and treated not as a scapegoat but as an ordinary private citizen cut off from royal privileges. Such a position, if true, marked a stark departure from the traditional approach favored by previous generations of the family, who often managed crises quietly behind closed doors. William, influenced by a more media-attuned era and an increasingly critical public, seemed to believe that half measures would not suffice in shielding the monarchy from long-term reputational harm, institutional resistance, and a royal rift. While William's concerns reportedly intensified over the years, his efforts to persuade the palace to take firmer action met resistance from the highest levels. Initially, both Queen Elizabeth II and then Prince Charles, now King Charles III, were reluctant to take the drastic step of completely severing ties with Andrew, despite the public discomfort surrounding him. Part of this reluctance was rooted in long-standing familial loyalty and the deeply ingrained royal ethos of unity. Even when faced with deep controversy, the palace had traditionally acted to protect its members from public embarrassment as much as possible, opting for quiet solutions rather than dramatic measures. And even as Andrew stepped back from active public duties, his retention of ceremonial roles and occasional public sighting reinforced this pattern of cautious management rather than total disassociation. According to palace insiders, the Queen, mindful of her second son's decades of service and her own parental instincts, expressed protective sentiments toward Andrew long after the public had tired of defending him. Prince Charles also urged a tempered approach, balancing accountability with familial duty. But William's view grew more vocal and more urgent. He expressed concern that every new revelation, whether legal, reputational, or sensational, would rekindle interest in the scandal and undo efforts to move past it. His argument was not merely about Andrew's past actions but about the ongoing vulnerability he posed to the monarchy's standing with a global public increasingly skeptical of inherited privilege. This growing divergence in perspectives set the stage for a rare and public-facing fissure within the royal family, a fissure that would only widen as the Epstein-related materials and revelations continued to surface over the years. The Epstein files renew the crisis. While the 2019 interview was widely criticized, the controversy refused to fade. Instead, it took on new energy with the periodic release of court documents, revelations, and posthumous memoir excerpts connected to Epstein and his circle. These releases intensified scrutiny of Andrew's past interactions and associations, prompting questions not only about his character but also about the monarchy's handling of the situation. Critics argued that the family had failed to adequately address public concerns or empathize with alleged victims, opting instead for damage control behind closed doors. The most significant wave of renewed attention came with the dissemination of what became known globally as the Epstein files, a release of material that brought fresh light to Andrew's connections with Epstein, including correspondence and details that appeared to contradict earlier statements. Each new detail amplified public curiosity and further complicated the monarchy's efforts to manage the fallout. For William, these ongoing revelations validated his long-held belief that half measures and internal negotiations were insufficient to contain the damage. In his view, the continued association of Andrew with royal imagery, at events, ceremonies, or in media reportage, risked normalizing the presence of a figure increasingly associated with controversy and scandal. It was against this backdrop of mounting public scrutiny and institutional frustration that William's calls for decisive action grew more insistent and, eventually, more public. King Charles's intervention and the stripping of titles. By 2025, the situation reached a turning point. Renewed public pressure, ongoing revelations, and internal deliberations culminated in a moment unprecedented in modern royal history. King Charles III moved to strip Andrew of his royal styles, titles, honors, and privileges. There are few historical precedents for such an action, and its execution represented both an institutional acknowledgement of the severity of the allegations and a symbolic nod toward accountability. In autumn 2025, it was announced that Andrew would no longer be entitled to use the style His Royal Highness, would forfeit the Duke of York title, and would relinquish other ceremonial roles granted at birth or by the monarch. The extended family, including Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, was formally protected from punitive action, a point of negotiation, it was reported, meant to shield them from collateral stigma. Critically, this move was not merely an administrative shift. It signaled a broader transformation in how the monarchy perceived itself in the 21st century, no longer a bastion of untouchable privilege, but an institution forced to confront the demands of transparency, accountability, and public sentiment. King Charles's decision has been described, both by royal commentators and by internal palace sources, as a defining moment in the monarchy's evolution, a moment where centuries-old traditions bumped against modern expectations of ethical standards. Though the king ultimately made the call, observers noted that William's long-held advocacy for stronger action against Andrew likely influenced the timing and decisiveness of the move. The public and institutional reactions. The fallout from these developments has been multifaceted. Public responses have ranged from relief that the monarchy appeared willing to take accountability to cynicism that the actions were too late or insufficient. Supporters of the move argue that stripping Andrew of titles was a necessary step not only to protect the monarchy's integrity but also to send a clear message that no member, however closely related to the sovereign, is above public expectations of ethical conduct. Detractors have highlighted what they see as the monarchy's reactive, rather than proactive, approach to crises. Some argue that the scandal exposed systemic weaknesses in how the royal family manages internal scandals and reconciles tradition with evolving societal norms. Within the institution itself, tensions have reportedly simmered between factions advocating for traditional discretion and familial loyalty, and those urging transparency and reform. William's outspoken stance, and his rumored disagreements with both his father and late monarch over Andrew's role, symbolizes this broader internal clash. The future of the monarchy. What does this saga mean for the British monarchy's future? In many ways, it is a litmus test for how the institution will adapt, or fail to adapt, to changing public expectations. Prince William, widely seen as the heir poised to modernize the monarchy's image, has positioned himself as a reform-oriented figure, one willing to make tough, even divisive, decisions in pursuit of long-term stability. His push to distance the monarchy from Andrew reflects a broader strategic calculus, a belief that embracing accountability and public trust is essential to the institution's longevity. King Charles's decision to strip Andrew of titles, while undoubtedly influenced by a confluence of factors, including legal scrutiny and public pressure, also represents a departure from the historically cautious royal approach to internal scandal. It acknowledges the brutal reality of modern media scrutiny and the power of public perception. For the monarchy as a whole, the crisis has underscored the need to reconcile tradition with transparency. Its survival in the 21st century may depend less on ceremonial pageantry and more on its capacity to demonstrate ethical integrity, adapt to public expectations, and manage internal conflict with credibility and purpose. Conclusion. The revelation that Prince William long sought the effective banishment of his uncle, Prince Andrew, years before the formal stripping of royal titles adds a human and strategic dimension to the ongoing transformation of the British monarchy. It reflects a generational shift in how institutional reputation is managed, how accountability is pursued, and how public trust is prioritized. From the disastrous interview that ignited the controversy, through years of simmering concern and internal debate, to the unprecedented removal of titles by King Charles, the story is one of institutional evolution squeezed between tradition and modernity. At its core, it is a testament to the complex interplay of family loyalty, public expectation, and the enduring question of how a centuries-old institution adapts to a world that demands not just symbolism, but accountability and transparency. Whether the monarchy emerges from this era strengthened or diminished remains to be seen. But one thing is clear: the era in which royal scandals were quietly managed out of the spotlight has given way to an age where accountability, public perception, and institutional reform stand at the forefront of the crown's enduring narrative.